Many thanks. Thanks for joining. Thanks for inviting me. It's very special for me to do this. Also for the topic that it is about methodology, I have to admit that that for a long time I have neglected this in my own doctoral research. That was quite weakly developed actually. But a bit over time that developed a bit, and I started to get really excited about it, and I hope to bring across some of that. Yeah, about myself, my background is is probably for many of you very interdisciplinary. So I started with environmental planning, so that's a bit the spatial sciences. That didn't appeal so much to me, but I did get excited for political philosophy, and then I already started to think about transition kind of themes. And I was very, very lucky that in the Netherlands around that time there was the big KSI program with a lot of PhD and senior researchers doing transitions research, and I managed to find a place there. So since then, I finished in 2012. Yeah, that took me 6 years to finish the PhD thesis. I've been doing transitions research so for more than a decade now. Since then, a bit specializing in issues of social innovation and what I now call critical innovation studies, if you've heard about it. We will come to that later. And in parallel, what I have done is spend a lot of time playing chess, in which I have a title too. And that for a lot of people, that means you're probably good in mathematics, these kind of things, but that is not how this works, and it's also not necessarily a matter of rigorous thinking, but it's all about creativity and just pure opportunism with a certain sense of patterns. So that's a bit, perhaps, that also leads me to the topic of today. There is quite a lot to say about that. I try to limit it to 7 loosely related topics that all have to do with case study design. I give some brief introduction, and there's room for questions and discussion. Yeah, I'll try to keep the time a bit, and we can always elaborate on parts. Yeah, where it started for me a bit, or an important moment in the thinking about the methodology, is at some points when the research agenda was being constructed and all people started to send in. I was involved in the methodology part there together with other colleagues, as indicated. That was for me, it was also a bit a moment that I realized that I cared very much about the topic. You could say sustainability transitions research, it's about very urgent matters. There's all kinds of reasons for very practice oriented action research kind of approaches. There's also reasons to focus on, okay, let's just work towards the practical advice, what we give. Why would you waste your time on methodological issues? What is the point of that? Yeah, one may think like that. At the same time, also this research agenda plays quite a part in that, in establishing Sustainability transitions research is a serious field of research with a certain coherence, with a certain research agenda, and that is typically what distinguishes a matured field. And I find it important that it is such an important topic. So then we also should really go all the way and have this established as a serious field that has a certain credibility in the broader scientific community. And considering that it's also urgent and so important, well, that also means that it deserves its own methodology work. So a bit since then, I never have the feeling that working on methodology issues that would be beside the point of transitions research. It's actually very important, and I would like to see more of it. Yeah, so where it started a little bit historically, the Blue Book is probably familiar to quite a lot of you. This is in the time that I still did my own doctoral research, that it was developed, and I think finished around the same time. They're just a bit too late for my thesis, but nevertheless, there is a very little part in the parts of Frank Gils and Johan Schott where they go into socio-technical approaches to transitions, where they discuss case studies in transitions. Why is case study research so particularly important for that field? I found that very instructive. I didn't have the book with me as I traveled, so I had to do this from memory, but you can look it up for yourself. I think most people have a certain idea why it is so important for our kind of field. So it's the complexity of transitions that is typically what case studies are good at in grasping complexity. So that's already in itself quite I would say almost sufficient reason. There are always multi-actor processes. That's also typically what case studies are good at in grasping, because they don't have the reductionism of certain other approaches, other methodological approaches. There's the in-depth sense of process, of development over time. Which is kind of obvious, because that is how transitions are defined. That's what they're all about. But also that it is not as trivial. They explain it really well. Why case research is good at that, and how we then also can make use of a lot of process. Methodology that has been developed over the years in other fields that is just entirely at our disposal. And Frank Gils and Johan Schott, they also make very good use of that. And gaining a sense of the politics, which was important to me, as I come a bit from the political science corner of the field. Well, and then there's more, but that's already reasons enough, and I can warmly recommend that. It's just some 10 pages or something, but just to reread that every once in a while. So you could say, on the basis of this, that the case study that it's kind of the default methodology for our field, and that has been brought out a bit simply by the sheer number that a lot of people do that, and also as that we can also ourselves experience that these considerations by Gils and Schott that actually works. When you do your case studies, you just find out how that works. But it may be the default methodology, but there is of course some discussion, and that is another thing that is important for a maturing research field. Yeah, this came up quite earlier. No, we flagged it in the research agenda, but it was also, I think that was Schott and Geels in 2008, where they addressed that. No, it is nice all these single cases, but in the end we need solid transitions insights. All these singular niches that we study in the end. How does it add up? What are the patterns? There have been some good questionings about some larger end studies, some review activities. What is it exactly what we do here in the field, and is that kind of a normal distribution? Are there certain things that we're missing out on? There's a couple of these studies out there. And it tends to be a bit the message that, yeah, there is some nice diversification going on, but we are not having enough of it yet. Certain approaches, they are indeed have become a bit default, and that is in the end for the development of the field, that is not so desirable. The references, they're all at the end of the slides, by the way. And I think I made it quite complete. Yeah, and also this quote is also important. I think this is of a group of editors, associate editors of the EIST journal in a paper that is looking forward to how could we and how should we develop with that journal. So now we appreciate submissions that make original conceptual, methodological, and/or empirical contributions, and it's nicely open, which go beyond the description of a single case. And I think the beyond is important here. Case or problem, but embed or relate it to the current state of the art in a thought-provoking manner. What you can get from this is, yes, it doesn't say anything against case study, but it does underline just some story, just some description. That is not really going to do it, or at least that is not going to gain a lot of enthusiasm. There has to be some kind of external validity or broader relevance, or some theorization going on beyond the mere description. I think it's not super surprising, the quote. It has always been like this, but here again you have it in a recent paper, expressed again as a quasi instructions to author kind of piece. Yeah, there's quite some discussion on the case study going on in transitions research for quite some time already. A very nice paper that I keep coming back to is by Frank Geels. Yeah, again him, but on this particular topic, it is indeed, he has been very important on these methodological issues from the beginning. This was a piece, I think it was a special issue on middle range theory, where the argument was, it is nice that we in our case studies and science and technology studies that we can deconstruct, that we can show that things are more complex than they initially seemed, and we can challenge, and we can indicate that the futures, that it's not that we should get away from the linear projections of them. All that we can do. But it's not enough, because in the end, what do we have to say to policymakers? They want to have factors. They want to have more reliable hard stuff. They want solutions. They want proof. And then piling up all of these nice stories about how complex things are, that is not that's not really what is going to convince them, and that is not really what in the end brings us forward. So that was already in 2007, mind you, almost 2 decades ago. And then we really need to get beyond mere description and deconstruction and the qualitative fuzziness, like, yeah, on the one hand, on the other hand, the things are not so clear. The kinds of things I like myself a lot, but he has a strong argument there. And we should get beyond the rare fecal phobia. Yeah, we should not be too afraid of reifying or of saying, well, the essence of the case is this, or the pattern that we see is this, and the pattern that we see, we can also see it elsewhere. We shouldn't be so afraid of making strong statements, and we also should not be afraid of at least trying for that. Very nice article. And of course, that came from somewhere, because he and colleagues, that was mostly in Eindhoven at the time, but others too, there is indeed all kinds of reasons to get beyond that radiophobia. There's quite some experience out there that helps us do that. These studies of the historical transitions, we can look back, we can see what happened, we can compare across domains and topics and technologies. It may be that the causality is complex, so now you need to be careful and you need to be a bit rigorous and systematic. But there are certain things that we can observe across cases. The example of hype cycles is a very good one. It's quite a recognizable phenomenon. That's in the histories of innovations, that there are certain cycles going on with expectations going up and down and disappointment setting in. So it is possible to synthesize case studies and distill patterns from them and get to the transition pathways in the end. That is the typical example of getting beyond the radiophobia. Taking several cases together, taking them apart, also reassembling them in these nice diagrams with arrows and boxes. This can be done, and we can all, since then, a lot of people have read that paper about the pathways. It has been criticized, but also there has been quite some confirmation of it as well. And we can all do that with our case studies. And what they do there with these pathways also assert quite strongly. We in transitions research the research philosophy, if you will, it's not the purely constructivist approach that we are taking here. That's not really what suits us. The arguments for critical realism, that's actually what fits our research field best. Consider that we do have some kinds of beliefs in patterned reality and the possibility to identify these patterns. And again, about that critical realist standpoint, that also has been Frank Geels and some others who have been discussing that a bit. How does that work in our field? And what are the arguments? Another nice paper has been discussing quite nicely that, it's nice, these pathways, how you can construct these on the basis of several case studies. It is nice to use process methodology for that. But this leaves room for quite a lot of interpretation, and you get rather strong narratives of how history works, how history unfolded. But in the end, if you're talking about changes in rules, how how strong is that as evidence really? What can you really demonstrate? How has a rule changed? How would you observe that? Quite some fundamental questions about how far we can actually go in identifying patterns. And that is then there you really have some debates that is starting, which I think is very, very important for our field. Now I'm not going to get into the details of it, but we can perhaps in the discussion, or perhaps just by reading the paper, which is quite a tough one to read, but it's all worth it. And yeah, that is also why in the research agenda that we got to a form of writing an agenda, not an agenda in the form of well, we have done this and now we should go more in the direction of that, or it is time to do away with our old habits that are wrong, but now we formulated them in the form of dilemmas. That is a bit. There's a couple of dilemmas that we need to really face in this research community. And this is a very important one that captures a bit this discussion of on the one hand, important to grasp the complexity of single cases, but at the same time work towards patterns. And then the question becomes a bit, how can you find nice balances between the two? Can you perhaps have both to a certain extent? Or can you perhaps come up with research designs that optimize a bit or that make bold choices in favor of the one or the other, the in-depth particularity or the generic insights? So that is a bit the general discussions here. Of course, the discussions, they echo a bit the general discussions in methodology that you have in every field and every discipline, and specifically about case study. So some of these you will recognize that a case study, want to write about it, or you want to justify what you did. What are then the typical things to bring up? What are then the typical things that end up in methodological sections or in talks with supervisors or colleagues? It is, for example, a case study. Yeah, but when you look at the handbook, there's all kinds of possible research designs that you have. Why this one? So. How does it do compared to a survey? Why didn't you do, or why did you do longitudinal or a comparative design or an experimental design? These questions always come up, and there's the handbooks for that. There is always that question, how do you argue the external validity? What is the broader relevance of this? This is only one case study, so indicate your limitations of your study, and especially master students tend to get into this mindset very strongly. I need to indicate the limitations of this, and then it's then they go self-castigating a lot. Nice paper also by Ben Flubiak. What are precisely the strategies of replication here? Is it empirical, theoretical? How do you do that? And indeed, how do you justify the limitations? That is one that I do not like a lot. I really try to get out of that. The thing is, justifying the limitations, that is just a very defensive mindset. I do not believe that that with all methodologies that we go so far in endlessly indicating the limitations. There was limited time. We didn't look at everything. It is only this case, etc., etc. Of course, the reflection is important. But that is reflection, but it's not, it doesn't have to be defensive. Somewhere on your screen, well, there's the 3 images. You can choose which one works for you. Burn and Ragin have been important to me. The whole questioning of what is a case, that is already, that's an open question. That is not a defensive line of reasoning. It's just saying, cases, they have borders. Or for the artists among us, Magritte, his whole work is about that. The relationship between the frame and the framed, what is in the case and what not, what changes if you make a case of something, how different is it then from the reality itself, if there is such a thing. There's all kinds of resources available that inspire a different mindsets about doing cases. And then becomes less of a matter of discussing in general whether a case study is a good idea compared to doing a survey, for example, but it becomes more a question of, okay, you do a case-based study, but what are the further choices that you make within that? What's the reasoning there? And that is that's definitely where I want to go. To seize the potentials for creativity in the case study design, where there is so many possibilities, and once you get into all these possibilities, then you get to much stronger methodological justifications also, rather than these general things about how a case study sits compared to other approaches like a survey. It becomes much more content considerations. It goes deeper. It goes more into the details, and you can get to reasonings of why you made particular choices, of why you combined in particular ways with other methods. Well, there we are. Of Sommers Kuldberg, these people, they do reflexive methodology that is it's very qualitative, it's very critical, but it's also quite fundamental. They make a quite strong relation with theory as well, and they also, since I read it, it also made a lot of a strong impression on me. What we should also do is get beyond this technical discussions about methodology, completely separate from theory. There is reasoning going on in methodology. It's not only about limitations or about right and wrong. It is really about developing a strong reasoning that connects your theory and your empirics and everything that you do, and make that coherent. And that makes it an intellectually very challenging and rich exercise, rather than following the textbooks and making sure that you don't tread wrong, which is very defensive. So this is one of the first reflections for myself that I did during my doctoral studies. I studied innovation in the traffic management field. You see on the right that figure that I drew. A bit clumsy, but okay, there it is. That's also how it was published. I did 4 cases. They were all in traffic management fields, all in the Netherlands. They were all interesting in themselves. They could also be compared, and I make sure that they could be compared by choosing a pretty basic theoretical framework. So that made it quite easy to make them comparable. It was not didn't go very deep. But what I also started to notice is that the cases that I had before, that somehow they were overlapping and they were interacting. There were things, there were movements towards making traffic greener, making traffic more efficiently flowing, making traffic better informed, yeah, with travel information developing a lot in the time. Working towards cross-boundary collaborations, that were the kinds of innovations that I was studying. And they had to do with each other. So that is how I got to this idea, like, okay, I do my singular cases, I do some kind of comparative analysis, in a bit of a primitive way, but you also have qualitative comparative analysis. There's very systematic, convincing ways of doing that. That is already nice, that you can do both. And then that last part, I called it intersections. Okay, that's a bit of a traffic-related wordplay. But the innovation journeys, they did intersect. And in principle, that is the kind of things that we want to know about in transitions research, how they co-evolve innovations. We work with the understanding of complex systems, of interactions and feedbacks between different innovations. So when we do a case study, when we do a study featuring several cases that somehow touch upon each other, that is something that can be done. Well, that is in a quite rudimentary form how I wrote that paper on it. Really a methodological paper with some review in it as well, bringing together some discussions that you had in the research field at the time about, indeed, what should we do? Should we do multiple systems or single systems or co-evolving systems, and how does that work? In transitions research, that tends to be quite a theoretical, empirical question, but there's also methodological questions. And I do have to say that whole idea of intersecting cases, how that works methodologically, what the pros and cons are, there's still quite some things to find out there. But as the figure sketches a bit, there's quite some choices to make, and it's not super difficult if you have a couple of them. Yeah, why not consider a bit? Just speculate at the least a bit how they might be interacting. Oh yeah, and in the comparative one, what we have now also, there's all kinds of review technologies that we have at our disposal nowadays. So the whole comparative part, that is something that nowadays become much more easier to review a lot of cases at once. That's a paper that I'm developing with Enrique Tateishi and Giuseppe Viola. Where it starts to blend a bit with reviewing methodologies, which I hadn't considered at the time. Speaking of time, I'll check a bit and I'll speed up a bit. Yeah, here it's again units of analysis. For a long time, I found that a pretty boring topic. Immediately when I saw it, the expression, yeah, okay, that's that technical thing where I need to be precise. That is what my mathematics teacher at some point pointed out during my studies. But it is not a technical matter. It's actually, it's more, now I think more of it as a philosophical kind of question. Because we are in our line of research, we are very often talking very casually about these things. Yeah, we talk, for example, about the social innovation or the innovation, or the innovation aims for this and this. It contributes to that, but that's very strange. They are not an innovation. Is that an actor? how does that then work exactly? Does it also have feelings? It's really in our language that we make these kind of expressions very easy, and especially in social innovation, you have that. So that raises these questions now: who is doing then the acting there? Which actors are we talking about? Which entities? Does the innovation act? Does there have to be some kind of initiative? A group of innovators? Is maybe the innovation itself that is doing something? As a social innovation, we were, for example, studying the basic income. The basic income does this. The basic income has the effects or supposed effect that and that. And yes, there is that to a certain extent, certain innovations can be considered as actors. That is what we did in another methodological paper with colleagues from Denmark, Julia Wittmeier, who you all know, to do the basic exercise. What kind of units of analysis are we actually talking about, or have we been talking about the last 2 years in our projects, and what would that then mean methodologically, and how can we write that out? So that was also a bit of a clumsy picture. You start to recognize the style a bit, not much evolution there, but the exercise is nice. The units of analysis, and this is not just a methodological issue, it is also intellectually, it is nice in your case to think a bit like, what are the things that I distinguish here, and how does that correspond then with the theory that I'm using? And then you can make nice choices. You can focus on one, or you can focus on two particular ones. You focus on the people involved with the innovation, but also how an innovation itself has a certain life of its own. These things we can play with. And that is nice to draw. It is nice to draw out cases visually. So there was a second pretty primitive one that also gave a lot of fun, and that made us realize that all the case studies that we had been coordinating within our consortium, we could have done it differently. And it also helped us to understand how different researchers within the same consortium, that they were inclined a bit more towards the one or the other. So these basic questions about units of analysis was in many ways quite a revealing exercise to do in the design, but also in retrospect to make better sense of what we were actually had been doing. A third one is quite familiar. It's a bit the line of reasoning that Geels and Schat have developed from early on. We are dealing with dynamic realities. In my case, it was a consideration about social innovation. This is profoundly about individuals and relations between individuals and organizational structures, institutions. It is all in flux, and that is what it's all about, the social innovation. That's a bit how we define it, that it is changes in these things. So this is on the ontological level, that is just fundamentally what we are talking about. So our methodology somehow needs to reflect that. So we should not think about solid, stable things, but we need to think in process terms. Well, familiar arguments, we can learn We can learn this already from these nice writings of Madeleine Akage and Latour and Calon. The people in actor network theory have done that, demonstrating that very beautifully, how you can think dynamically about reality, but also how you can then make sure that as an innovation researcher, that you then also methodologically, that you really follow that and that you are true to that. And the question that we raised together with my colleague René Kemp, what we realized a bit is that there are certain stories that develop very easily about certain social innovation initiatives, like an eco-village or a group of slow food activists. They are radical, they are not. They are being very innovative, and they are being a bit reactive, restorative. And that is indeed what you have in social innovation. It's partly invention, it's partly reinvention. Which, for example, eco-village, that is the way they, just if you look at on a picture, it has something retro about it. And that's that they easily start to live their own lives. They become a bit stereotypes. There's a certain pigeonholing coming up about who is who. Whilst if you look at it more carefully, a lot of these initiatives, they develop over time. They merge and they split and they change their objectives. There's different generations that follow up. There's different contexts also in which they are more or less new, because the novelty of an innovation that depends on the context in which it operates. Whether you were hitchhiking in the 60s or do it now, that's it. In terms of novelty or social innovation, that's different things. So what we try to do there is, well, not only make that typology, which of course is what we all love in transitions research, but also develop a typology that is dynamic, where we mind the shape-shifting of certain niches over time, where we express that a certain niche or a certain innovation, that it gets a different meaning against this context over time. We call that shape-shifting. Now that I look at it, the arrows, they're a bit straight. It's still a bit too orderly. The figure should have been a bit more fuzzy, actually, compared to the ideas behind it. And it should look a bit more like, the picture that you see above. But again, we don't have these kind of visual talents. But dynamic typologies, that's put briefly, developing dynamic typologies is a typical way of getting to some further creativity in what we do with our cases.
Bonno, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. There's 5 minutes left for the presentation.
Yeah, I can speed this up. The triangulation is very simple. We know all this, that there's various sources that we can use, and that it's good to combine them. And there are studies who indicate that, how different studies, how they make use of different sources. I think the main thing we can observe from that list that you see there, that it's quite limited. In principle, a lot more is possible in terms of empirical sources. And it's not so easy to do, perhaps, or somehow you easily get into that triangle of, we do some documents, some interview, and maybe a little survey or something. But so much more is possible. There's media analysis. The one I cite here is a nice example of that recently. There is I read about there's this hybrid ethnography, online and offline. Nowadays, if you want to do ethnography, maybe that is the way. Because reality is a bit like that. There is in the field of mobility studies, there is a whole repertoire of data gathering methods that, for example, use mobile data because it's out there. And if you want to study movements, then maybe in your data gathering, you can apply that as well. And of course, there's further triangulation possible in the theoretical sense, multi-perspective analysis, but only in the data already. There is so much more possible, which makes sense for us transitions researchers. The example there, energy crisis, I can read there. What media, how they frame identities of actors, that is so important for transitions nowadays. In media studies, that is all what these people do. There's so much methodological knowledge out there that we can use. Well, this one is pretty basic. We should triangulate a lot more, or we can, and that's the nice thing in case studies. You can do that. Critical innovation studies, the book that I indicate here, basically raises this question a bit. Why is it that we always, in our thinking about innovation, that we follow certain taken for granted understandings of innovation, that it is about technology, that it is about S-curves? Why are we always focusing on the initiatives that are already empowered? Why are we so drawn towards the iconic examples of the Ford and Musk, or the transition towns? Why is that? And can't we question a bit our silent understandings about what innovation is about, and what kind of empirical studies does that bring us? Well, there is quite a lot of that going on in transition studies. Fortunately, this book is also very, very warmly recommended by Vink and Godin. Basic thing is to go to look a bit beyond the tip of the iceberg, where that attracts, for obvious reasons, the most research attention. If you look for websites of initiatives, certain initiatives, they have a website. Nice, I found it, and the other doesn't have a website. We don't take those as for a case study too difficult. There's quite some things going on there. A nice paper by Laura Kanner, where he also addresses that. What about the systems that we do not study, but which may be interesting empirically, but also theoretically for the field? A very, very nicely written paper. In my research on energy citizenship, I found it. There's quite some assumptions of that all these citizens are active. Nice study in political science already much earlier about political passivity. There's quite some studies being done on that. There is, of course, the studies about discontinuation, the X-curve thinking. That is definitely well established already. There is nice studies on very unusual transition agents. In this case, the fleet managers. They manage the fleets of companies, which kind of cars they choose. Not the first, not your usual suspects. And there is the idea that we should focus less on the front runners. So all these things together, the basic thing, they follow a bit the same methodological principle. I hope it's a bit clear, and it also indicates that much, much more is possible beyond this. This is, let's say, only the tip of the iceberg of diving under the iceberg, so to say. There's so much more possible in this direction. Mixed methods, I think there's going to be somebody's going to talk more about that. Just saying that the same article by Bernard Truffer and colleagues also argue for a certain shift towards that in ICE. So you can read that back. There's various reasons for that. Now, of course, we can compare cases. So to a certain extent, that is a mixed design. There is quite some handbooks. The Blatter and Haverland one I like a lot, which is quite systematic about how you can combine larger and smaller in research, which is very good for us transitions researchers. There is all kinds of activities in the modeling community, how you can refine your models through cases and how you can formalize cases through the models. That in itself deserves a lecture, by the way, so I warmly recommend that, but you should ask somebody else to do it. Of course, within a PhD trajectory, it just makes sense to think about synergies between the papers. That is also a bit how I got to that intersections idea. It just makes sense, or it is a wasted opportunity if you don't. And maybe this is the most important one. A lot of our research happens in the context of consortia. So that case study, it tends to feed into other activities or feed from other activities. So also for that, for us, it is relatively makes even more sense than normal to think in a mixed method way about our case studies, because it's quite rare that we entirely work alone. And that has to be done then really early on. That is then for early career researchers, that is a bit a challenge, perhaps. Ask supervisors about this, I would say. But it gives this opportunity and these consortia. This is number 7, so that's really the last one. What you all, of course, get, that picture of the looking inside these rooms and these cases, there is something, there is certain dangers of voyeurism there, and that discussion, again, you will have another webinar on that as well. The arguments from action research, all this observing of the actors all the time, calling them up, visiting them, wanting to interview in the end to construct your transition pathways 3.0. And what is that to them? That isn't serious discussion that we have. There is serious discussions about epistemic extractivism. What is the reciprocity here in all that observing? How to deal with those ethics, important, and also there I think there is a certain room for creativity rather than an ethics that is very rule-based or principled. There's just various ways of handling that. So now what I'm going to say now, that is from the point of view of creativity and not from particularly strong moral principles. One thing I find important, all our case studies are in somehow they are action oriented. Why would you do it? They're all attentive to politics. They're all doing cases that are somehow motivated by certain ecological, environmental urgency, because that's how the whole field is defined. That is why we do it. That is why we like to be in that field, I assume. So in any case, from a creativity point of view, what we can easily dismiss or get out from is this idea is that either you do engaged action research or you do disengaged ivory tower research, because nobody in this field is doing the former anyway. So the endless juxtaposition of the two in this discussion, very, very uninteresting discussion, and most of the time an easy action research argument to avoid talking about what you yourself have been doing, but it's a false dichotomy. more interesting is that there is various kinds of roles that researchers can take in these kind of case studies. Jullie with my negotiator have distinguished 5 of them, and on the basis of the 5 you can consider further also. And apart from that, these different roles of researchers, there's also just a much longer discussion about the various roles of that research can play in society in terms of critical content, in terms of supporting societal debates. There's just various positions from which researchers can play an important, influential role in society. And there have been much longer debates on this than we have had them within our field. And I find the second one very important, especially in times of Trump, Harvard situations. These things become very actual. And that goes beyond the roles of researchers. That's the role about research in society. And a recent paper also has addressed this well. What we get as ethics guidelines for our case research, that is all nice, but it doesn't really tell us what to do, and it doesn't really get us to the full debate on this. There's all kinds of dilemmas that we express in doing action research or case research, and that is what we should be talking about more and exchanging more. And finally, about that voyeurism, I think in case study, we do not have to do our case studies in a way that we start to resolve the problems of the people that we study, because they have been doing that for years already. So why would we assume that we can do better? But what we can do is bring something new to the table, to shed different light on the situation, to turn it around, to come with a very unexpected framing of things, focus on other units of analysis, you name it, bring out certain paradoxes rather than solve the known problem. Do not indicate how do we get to the finish line, but to discuss, bring out the directionality involved, as Andy Sterling has been working on for forever. That's the kind of things that we can do, and also that ethically there is quite a lot of room for creativity in case research. And again, also what Truffaut and colleagues said, it is not about the recording and the describing of the reality. It's really about make sure that you distill insights for transitions research, which you can also read ethically as an argument for case research that really takes out something different from that reality studied. And I completely agree with that. That is the task that we have to society. Almost all the references used. Have fun with those. Just pointing out, there is a track at IST on methodology. I just wanted to bring that under your attention. That is very cool that we have this now. I hope to see you there. And I thank you also for your lenience with the time. Sorry for that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pel. It was quite really